The suspected gangster at the heart of world boxing. Wait till you hear this. I don't know if you know this, but get yourself strapped in for this one, because we're going to go down a rabbit hole full steam ahead. And thank you for joining me by the fire. Grab yourself some tea, some coffee, maybe something a little stronger. Not too sure if you're into that, but grab yourself a brew. And what the hell? So, first and foremost, I want to say that I am a massive Tyson Fury fan. A massive fan of boxing. Competed when I was younger in the Antrim Championships and the Ulster Championships, and I do know what it takes to enter a competitive environment, and it's tremendous to see someone like Tyson Fury coming back from the type of struggles. But when you find these prominent key figures that pop up, and not only do they pop up, they stay there. These are key figures in the background of boxing, and there's a part of me is very glad that I am not a part of this world in the terms of being attached to these types of individuals. But let's get into the story. I am just reading this article. This is not my opinion. I will give my opinion as we're going along, but this is a very interesting, and we're going to back it up through evidence, and let's talk about it and think on it, just like the thinker here, Dante, or Deontay, whichever way you want to do it. But of course, Fury has reclaimed the WBC belt. A lot has happened. So much has happened, and if you don't know the background, I read both of Fury's books. I actually have a book which is a signed book from Fury himself, and I highly recommend the books. But in the book, I don't believe this man comes up, but this man that you see before you is going to be so important in what's going on here. And not only that, many people will actually die because of what we're going to talk about. A lot of deaths, and this is crime related, but also sport, because we're in the combat sports here. There's a lot of people subscribe to this channel for combat sports alone, and I do like to talk about paranormal stuff, paranormal type of stuff, but this is the opposite, complete opposite. And so, of course, the BBC, I'll first and foremost say this, that the BBC are not always credible, but do your own investigation, your own independent research on this. And so the revelation, let's get into this story. And as I said, get yourself something, a brew, and let's sit down for this one, because I'm a big Tyson Fury fan. Big fan of Fury. It was brilliant to see him come back. But I don't know, because the BBC have always had it out for him. They've always, but sometimes Fury is his own worst enemy, and he makes that clear in his book. And maybe sometime we can read it here, but the revelation, let's get on with the story, let's get on with it. So, thank you for being here. God bless you. God bless your family and all your loved ones. It was the Gypsy King himself who revealed it all in a near joyous social media post last June. I'm sure you can remember this if you're a boxing fan. So Fury goes on to say, I'm just after getting off the phone with Daniel Kinahan. And here is Mr. Daniel Kinahan here, and we're going to go into a lot. We're going to go into a lot here, including footage of different different things that go on, but strap yourself in for this one. And so I'm just getting off the phone with Daniel Kinahan. He's just informed me that the biggest fight in boxing history has just been agreed. Get in there, my boy, you big dossa. He actually didn't say that, but get in there, my boy. The big fight was on. Terms had been agreed for the contest. Boxing fans wanted more than any other. Tyson Fury versus Anthony Joshua. What a fight that's going to be. But wait until you hear this. Fury's post exultant. Fury's post was exultant. Big thank you for Dan for getting this deal over the line. So that is the clip. And I don't know if that got copyrighted. You know, the sound, the audio. But this is the clip where you can see it. So he says Daniel Kinahan there. So there he is. And what it would lead to is something that'll end up like this. And not only will it end up like this, it will actually begin with this. And strap yourself in. So Daniel Kinahan has been thanked by Fury here. This is very, very, very bizarre. So for British fight fans, I'd actually say for fans all around the world, for British fight fans, it couldn't have been better news. The two best heavyweight boxers in the world would fight it out to be the undisputed world champion. Boxing loves hype, but it is almost impossible to overstate the significance of this contest. Amen. When it happens, it will be the biggest blah 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 big money fight, hundreds of millions of pounds. Yep, okay, we'll get all that. At the end of it, one of the two British boxers will stand. Right, okay, we both know that. And if you're not a boxing fan, the titles that are on the line are the same titles that Muhammad Ali claimed. But the only people to ever regain the Ring magazine twice was Fury. The Ring magazine belt. And of course the lineal champion. But of course some say the lineage was broken when he retired. But I believe you have to beat the man in the ring in order to break it. But it's up to your philosophy. So, right, okay, so, but Tyson Fury hadn't just given boxing fans the news that they wanted to hear. He had also given up one of boxing's darkest secrets. The man he thanked 3 times. So, this man was prominent and significant enough in Fury's deals being done that he had to thank him 3 times in a 55-second video. It is alleged to be one of Europe's top mobsters. Whose cartel deals in drugs, guns, and murder. I don't like that. Murder. That's Tyson Fury's divisor, Daniel Kinahan. And look, you can notice this is when Fury wasn't well. Why the hell is Daniel Kinahan around Fury when he wasn't well? Well, we're going to find out here. So, three months later, I was walking to a former boxer. I was talking to a former boxer outside a gym he runs in major British city in a major British city for a BBC panorama documentary. A BBC panorama documentary. Social scientists would describe the neighbourhood as suffering from a long-term economic decline. So where this was, and I don't know if the BBC has got a credible individual here. I really don't know about that. So this person claims to be that he runs a gym in a major British city. Social scientists would describe social scientists. I wonder who that is, who a social scientist is, who describe the neighbourhood as suffering from long-term economic decline. This man has worn a few hats in his time, most significantly as a part-time guardian to a number of young folk. I asked him what he thought of Tyson Fury's news when he first heard of it. Delighted, great news, he says, but it's not the big fight. I thought, finally, we have to deal with Daniel Kinahan, he says. They will have to get rid of him from boxing. The police will deal with him. Everyone knows now. Everyone knows now what. Everyone knows now what. But this day, he was totally delusioned. Yeah, delusioned. Months had passed and nothing had changed. Look up that street there, he demands. So this guy who he met said, look up this street here. There's teenage girls turning to prostitution to pay for their drug habits. Kids all around on drugs. It's very sad, if that is true. Although Daniel Kinahan had never been convicted. Although Daniel Kinahan had never been convicted, this man is all too aware of the Irishman's reputation that he has been named in court as a head of a drug cartel. The man I was meeting wanted to know why he should be trying to convince the kids that boxing offered them a safe haven. How could he argue that boxing protected them from drugs, from gangs, from violence, when a man like Daniel Kinahan was at the top of the sport? That is a good question, whoever this stranger is. My colleague Stephen Dempster, who had spent weeks training to find people in boxing who could speak out about Kinahan. This was the start of a very unusual road trip that had begun with a conversation with a long retired boxing fanatic in Belfast. In Belfast? You! There's us. Belfast. We built the Titanic and it sunk. What does that tell you? Don't build ships here. So, in Belfast, he gave us one name and the phone number. We followed his lead and got another name. And so it went. So obviously this went on and on. It was as if there was a secret association at the heart of boxing, all united on one point. Daniel Kinahan was a disaster for the fight game. But please, they all said, don't mention my name. But please don't mention my name, he said. So this guy made it clear, don't mention my name, or else you'll find out. These people were big men mostly. So all these people were big men. All of them being around a few nuts in their time. All of them had been around a few nuts in their time. And all of them were afraid of Daniel Kinahan, Tyson Fury's main man. I don't know if this is what this is the image. And you've got the Garda Síochána here and the ERU, I believe these are called, the Emergency Response Unit. And as you can see, where the technical comes from. Technical thinker, because it's special weapons and tactics, and our minds are more dangerous than any weapon. I've got a few friends that are fluent. Escalia, I get the bug, but I'm Bruno. Tac- Technical, but I don't know if it's the same way. So the technical bureau. But these are a very elite force, the ERU, the Irish Technical Unit of the Garda Síochána, the Irish National Police Force and Security Service, and it's actually a detachment of the army which regularly trains with the Irish Rangers or the Irish Spec Ops, which is very elite. Very, very elite. So this is the image. Let's go on with the story. And this is the hotel shooting. So it was a little after 2 o'clock on Friday, the 5th of February 2016. Newspaper photographer Ernie Lyle was scanning the outside of the Regency Hotel in North Dublin. Regency? Isn't that Regency? Yeah. Regency Hotel, North Dublin. He was looking for signs of Daniel Kinahan, a man he knew he was alleged the boss of a powerful drugs cartel. Lyle and Alan Sherry, a reporter colleague from Ireland's Sunday World newspaper, thought that there was a fair chance Kinahan would be about. His boxing management company, MGM, was hosting a big tournament, the Clash of the Clans, on Saturday. And you probably remember this. And if you don't, you're about to see something very shocking. Very shocking. It was a joint promotion between Kinahans, MGM, and Frank Warren, one of the biggest names in British boxing. On this afternoon, the boxers were all taking part in a weigh-in in the hotel. Fans and supporters were in attendance. Lyle drove past the front of the hotel, but there was no sign of Kinahan. Then we spotted this guy, and we knew he was a part of the gang. He was going from the car to the back of the hotel. So this guy was going from the car to the back of the hotel. So we decided to park up and maybe get some shots of him and others at the end of the weigh-in. But inside the hotel, murder and mayhem were imminent. The last fighter was about to be weighed in was Gary Sweeney. Done. So the weigh-in done. The Irishman turned to walk off the stage and continued preparations for his first professional fight since he had turned pro under Daniel Kinahan at MGM. A camera phone captured what happened next. And these are actually two individuals that were outside the hotel having a smoke. And this is what they seen. So you're probably not knowing what the hell's going on. You're probably thinking, hold on a minute, wait a minute. Probably saying, wait a minute. What the hell went on there? There was a weigh-in, people making weight, there was a fight, there's Kinahan, and then there's a weigh-in, and one of these fighters is Kinahan's fighter, and then what? And then there was murder and mayhem. Yeah, and this is what entered in the front door. And as you can tell, they look like SWAT. So there was a sudden explosion of noise screams of fear and panic, and at least one gunshot. Sweeney and everyone else diced to get away and out. On one's phone footage, a voice of a terrified child can be heard saying, "Daddy, help me." That was Sweeney's 8-year-old nephew. There was no cheer to his uncle Gary. Now they were all running for their lives. And I'm going to show you that. And these people entered the hotel armed with Kalashnikovs. And that was actually the son, that wasn't me. This is me here, but that was actually the son. Click that. And this is the way in. So okay. So 8 minutes later, a middle-aged man wearing a distinctive flat cap had walked through the hotel, linked arm in arm with what appeared to be a female companion. They were looking for Daniel Kinahan with an aim of shooting him dead. So Daniel Kinahan, the very start that's pictured with Fury, they were in to do a hit on him. Later, witnesses would say that they made an odd couple. For starters, the female was wearing a wig and seemed to be having trouble. So seemed to be having trouble walking in high heel boots. So when they appeared in the Regency suite, it didn't take very long before people realised that something was very off. That they were now both wielding handguns, completed in the picture. 3 other gunmen arrived in the lobby of the hotel. They were dressed in uniform of the Irish Police Emergency Response Unit, or also known as ERU, and carried what appeared to be Kalashnikov rifles. And just as this weigh-in is going on, at this exact moment, this weigh-in was being made. And this is Kinahan's fighter, Clash of the Clans, as you can see. 2 officials either side marking down his weight. And exactly when this was going on, exactly at the same time, these boys hit the front door and hit the back door. And this is what happened. These boys come in with these guns. Straight out. Isn't this absolutely bizarre? It gets even more insane. Some of those fleeing from the weigh-in ran straight into them. One of them being David Byrne, or Brian. David Byrne, sorry, that'll be. I think. So the crowd ran into these as they were running in. The crowd were running out, and they ran into each other. So David Byrne, regarded as a top criminal associate of Daniel Kinahan, was shot dead. Security cameras tracked the progress of all the gunmen as they began roaming the hotel, hunting Kinahan. So these boys weren't messing around. 2 associates of Kinahan were shot and injured. but their quarry had escaped. Photographer Ernie Lyle had heard the first shot. So the photographer, he was a photographer taking photographs of, he was meant to take photographs of the fighters after the weigh-ins. So he was ready with his camera, ready to roll. These boys were ready to shoot, and he was ready to shoot, but shoot his camera. So the photographer went on to say, we were sitting in the car, and when we heard a loud crack, we looked at each other in shock. We couldn't believe it. Then we saw people running in a state of panic. He spotted a man wearing a flat cap running towards a parked van. It was instinct. So the photographer went on to say, it was instinct. I thought I could see something in his hand, said Lyle. I stopped the car and grabbed the camera and just started to shoot away. Isn't that fascinating? Reported Alan Cherry noticed something else, a long barreled gun pointing out of the van's window. Then it pointed directly at them. Lyle threw the car in the reverse and the van drove off in the opposite direction. Without pausing to study the pictures, the photographer sent them to his news desk. What they didn't know until the editor rang him was that he had captured not one of the gunmen, but he had actually captured two of the gunmen leaving the scene. And where is... Can you see the second gunman? So where's the first man? That's the first man. Kevin Murray. And where is the second? Here you go. And I hope that you can see that. And it's a man taking off his wig, as you can tell in the previous story there. One photograph was crisp and clear, and it showed the flat cap with his gun, and running just ahead of him was a female with a gun, and both faces were in sharp focus. Fantastic photo. Flat cap, what they're calling them in abbreviations, flat cap, was quickly identified as Kevin Murray from Strabane in Northern Ireland. The 46-year-old, known to have ties with dissident Republicans, remnants of the IRA, was arrested. He didn't face trial though, because he was very ill of motor neurons disease and died 18 months after the shooting. So yeah, he had motor neurons disease. Irish police were convinced that the female attacker, in abbreviations, attacker, or in commas, was the Dubliner Patrick Hutch. His brother Gary had also been Daniel Kinahan's right hand man, but they had fallen out and Gary had been shot dead, and the Hutch family had blamed Kinahan. The Irish police had their motive. Hutch, then 24, was charged with murder, but this trial collapsed 2 years ago and he remains a free man, except that he, like other members of his family, now lives with a permanent death threat over him. So if you didn't get all that, I'll explain this, that these used to be associates with Kinahan, Fury's advisor, and now they're not. So let's actually get into that, the feud. And this article goes on and on and on. It's a fascinating article. And there was a time when heroin couldn't be found in Dublin, half a century ago, maybe. But by the time Daniel Kinahan's father, Christopher, was dealing heroin in the 1980s, it had taken a grip in the city. A particular group of criminals saw the market. The market says Michael O'Sullivan a former assistant commissioner of the Garda Síochána, the Irish police force. Then they had contacts in the UK. They sought to make a lot of money and introduced heroin into Dublin City around 1980. Scumbags. God forgive me. Back in the day, Michael O'Sullivan was a drug squad officer in Dublin in 1986. He arrested Christopher Kinahan Sr. for heroin dealing. He was operating. So this is where Kinahan gets his foundational power from. He was operating a safe flat, a luxury apartment, which was the nerve centre of the distribution of the heroin through most of Dublin City. Christopher Kinahan's own background was, as they say in Ireland, respectable. The family home in North Dublin reported to be the childhood home of Irish Prime Minister, and past pupils at his school he attended included the literary giant James Joyce. He wrote eulogies and songs of Wandering Agnes, beautiful poet. As a Dubliner crime reporter, Nicola Talleyrand tells us, unlike most of those people who fall into crime for one reason or another, Christopher Kinahan Sr. chose a life of crime. According to O'Sullivan, he wasn't your average guy who took over drug operations. He was a bit smarter, a bit more strategically focused in thinking down the road as to the next move. After his arrest, Kinahan was sentenced to 6 years in jail and other shorter prison terms would follow in Ireland, Netherlands and Belgium. But all the while, Kinahan was building up a list of contacts, growing what made to become in law enforcement circles as Kinahan's Organised Crime Group, or KOCG. By 2010, the KOCG had centred its operations in Marbella in southern Spain. Brothers Daniel and Christopher Jr. were now suspected of helping their father run the family cartel. Daniel Kinahan was already significantly prominent to be the name checked in an American diplomatic cable sent from Sierra Leone to Washington DC. Sierra Leone. Washington DC. The cable sent in November 2009 said UK police forces described him as an Irish businessman involving in narco trafficking throughout Europe. And this guy is going to be really big in the terms of his criminalities. He's going to be up there in the terms of the population of Ireland. This guy is one in a million, or 1 in a billion probably. So, and I am giving no credit to these people. This video isn't to promote violence, it's actually to make people walk away from it. There's no point in this life of this criminal. There's absolutely no gain to be got from it apart from lust of material crap. So let's get on with the story. He may be interested in expanding his business to network in Africa, West Africa. So I looked into that and it's insane. Let's just stay on this. In May 2010, Spanish authorities were in the assistance of the Irish, British and Dutch police launched what appeared to be a decisive series of raids as a part of a far-reaching investigation into the KOCG. The 3 Kinahans were associates were arrested. So Kinahan and associates were arrested. Homes and expensive cars were seized. and it looked like that there would be an end of a road. It would look like it would be the end of the road for the Kinahan firm. So it looked like it was over here. Nope. The Irish media feasted on the details of the Spanish investigation. Journalist Stephen Breen and colleagues Owen Cullen actually got their hands on a copy of the police files. Co-authors of the cartel and a study of the KOCG that they were among the groups of dedicated Irish journalists who became rigorously detailed in the activities of the Kinahans. Their money laundering networks were global and including over €500 million worth of properties in northern Brazil. What I found out was the money laundering, where the money laundering comes from, is that a lot of money was taken through, washing machine shops where you do your laundry. That back in the day, the mafia were actually using cleaning stores to cover up their money, and that's why they're called laundering. So let's get back to the story. And the authorities had made up their mind about the eldest Kinahan brother, as Breen explains. They identify Daniel Kinahan as having overall control of the day-to-day running of the cartel. But Operation Shovel, as it's called, proved to be no real bait. In the last 10 years and resulted in a major charges. So it lasted nearly 10 years. None at all for Daniel. He has no convictions. Once upon a time, the extended Hutch family from the north inner city Dublin So the Irish police say that Gary Hutch, the boss of the Hutch clan, and Christopher Senior, laundered cash, processed stolen checks, and generally helped out each other. But there were differences. Gary Hutch is known as the monk. Christopher Senior is also known as the Dapper Don. Gary Hutch did robberies. He frowned on drugs. Kinahan Senior couldn't deal enough of them. Gary Hutch was Gary's nephew. Unfortunately, as things turned out, he would choose the crime model of Christopher Kinahan Senior, not his uncle's. He moved to Spain, close to Daniel Kinahan. Investigators there concluded he is Daniel's right-hand man and transits Daniel's orders to members of lower rank. So he does all his dirty work. Then came the fallout. So by 2014, Gary was suspended of being an informant. Dun dun dun. So he was suspended. This may or may not be the catalyst for what happened next. Sure, the certain facts are that in the cartel would expect when it comes to who has to be shot or who has to be killed. 2 years earlier, Kinahan had helped set up a boxing management company and a gym in Marbella. His business partner and face of the enterprise was Birmingham boxer Matthew Macklin. It was also Macklin's gym, Marbella, or MGM. Isn't that insane to see that type of boxing club? Kinahan's interest in boxing went back to his Dublin days. He was more than a fan of the sport and had been running his own gym in the Spanish city before he teamed up with Macklin and opened MG in 2012. Here's a photo of Kinahan. In Britain, most in the sport probably shared the view of boxing writer Tris Dixon. I don't think that anyone predicted how big and powerful it would become, and that it would seed for what would happen in the years that followed. For sure, well-known criminals used the gym, but MGM had become known for a serious professional base for boxers, and it was successful. Talented young boxers and Irish fighters began training at MGM. Good financial terms were on offer, and the best facilities were on tap. Among the recruiters of Tom Stalker, the captain, Stalker, the captain of the successful British 2012 Olympic boxing team. The most powerful people in British boxing are promoters Eddie Hearn and Frank Warren. By the summer of 2014, both had visited and broken bread with Daniel Kinahan. These relationships would become more important with time. MGM was quickly becoming a player in the boxing business, and despite its apparent attraction to well-known criminals, it seemed divorced from the outworkings of criminality. That was about to change. This is a photograph, a very, very sad image here. About 10 seconds after this photograph, this individual was murdered, shot in the head. The first came the shooting that August of top boxing trainer Jamie Moore at Daniel Kinahan's Spanish home. Moore, who had been working at the Marbella's gym, survived, but he wasn't the intended target. It widely reported that the gunman had been hunting Daniel Kinahan himself. 1 month later, another regular at the gym reported mobster Jared Kavanagh was shot. Mysterious violence was suddenly stalking MGM, and somewhere in the furious mix of paranoia, alleged drug dealing, drug taking and guns, and someone resolved to kill Gary Hutch. Word was that he had organised an attempt on a hit on Daniel Kinahan. Reports suggest a deal to see if his life had been drawn up between his family and the KOCG, or the Kinahans. If it had not been, it didn't hold. So, if there was a deal done, it certainly didn't hold. He was shot dead in Spain a year later. Gangland's killings are not unusual, but those with any understanding of criminal networks in Dublin knew this was different. There would be consequences. In Marbella, you may have thought of the shadow of the gunman who had obliterated MGM's trajectory. 3 shootings, 2 murders, but you'd be wrong. By the year's end, MGM and Daniel Kinahan would boast of 2 world champions, Liam Smith and Billy Joe Saunders. That success would breed further success. Kinahan had big plans from the start. Remember, he was thinking ahead. And Jason Coogan, or Kugeln ran a legal centre in Marbella at this time. No stranger to crime himself, he had served in time in jail for robbery. Danny Kinahan is a personal friend of mine, says Coogan. When he had first started this gymnasium, he had a lot of dreams in his head that he couldn't even keep up with. He said, I'll make the biggest boxing promotion gym. He said, I'll make the biggest boxing promoting gym in the world. But first came the clash of the clans. And there's the last video I showed you there. I actually got the video. So the organisation, so days after the Regency weigh-in in the shooting, the killing started in earnest. The taxi driver, Eddie Hutch, was shot dead, an execution thought to be carried out by the Kinahan cartel. Irish police resources had said he was an innocent man, but he was the brother of Gary Hutch, the man alleged to have organised the hotel hit. So going back to the woman dressed up, the Kinahan cartel were blamed for most of the killings that followed. For 2 years, a small section of the city appeared under siege. And this is crazy. A total of 18 people would die, most of whom were relatives or associates of Hutch. Isn't this insane? 18 people. And the Kinahan cartel became more ferocious. How do you say that word? Scrutiny. Damn. Scrutiny. Ferocious scrutiny. So the cartel came under ferocious scrutiny from the Irish authorities. Dozens of gang members were jailed. None of the alleged leaders of the cartel faced charges, but in the view of the police, their role was made clear. In 2018, the Irish High Court accepted the police evidence that the KOCG was an international crime group that had its drug operations were controlled by Daniel Kinahan. Later, the Irish Special Criminal Court accepted that the KOCG was involved in drugs, weapons trafficking, money laundering, and execution-style murders to protect its interests. Meanwhile, in Spain, the police concluded that Daniel Kinahan was involved in Gary Hutch's murder, although they admitted they did not have the evidence to prove it. We have been told by police sources in the UK that the Kinahans are under investigation for suspected drug trafficking in Britain. We asked the US Drug Enforcement Agency, or the DEA, about the activities of the Kinahan cartel. They told us that they will not be able to comment because this is a part of an ongoing investigation, they said. And while all this was happening with the law enforcement, a revolution of sorts was reaching mutiny in the sport. Maturity in world boxing at MGM in particular. First in January 2017 came the news that Daniel Kinahan was officially standing down from the company. So he stood down here. Matthew Mackin said he would move in, following the bad publicity. The company changed name to rebranded. So MGM changed from MGM to MTK. So when you hear MTK, it was previously MGM. Later that year, the company got a new boss, Sandra Vaughan, a Scottish fake tan entrepreneur and a long-term friend of Daniel Kinahan's. After buying the business from Matthew Macklin, uh, she was in the plans to point out that Kinahan and MTK had cut ties. Except it is not as simple as that. Step into the picture, Tyson Fury. And I'm a massive Fury fan, by the way. Fury had been in a bad place after winning the World Heavyweight title in 2015. He spent most of that following year in a tumult of drugs, drink and depression. He had to relinquish his titles. I don't think he had to. I think he was stripped and his weight ballooned. But in 2017 he began a remarkable comeback in Marbella at MTK. Isn't this just very sad to hear? But I'm not saying that I believe all this, that Fury is involved, but this is dodgy. This is dodgy. At MTK, he slowly regained his fitness and health. Daniel Kinahan was close by. Matt Christie, who edits British publication Boxing News, has kept a keen eye on Fury's journey. I think what is generally known or generally accepted is that Daniel Kinahan played a massive part in getting Tyson Fury out of darkness and offered him a route back to the sport of boxing. I don't really know if this is true from him. I really don't know. But things aren't looking too good in the terms of who Fury has here. We haven't been told what precise date Daniel Kinahan became Tyson Fury's official advisor, in commas. But in November 2017, on Kinahan's advice, Fury signed with MTK Global. So the doubler may not have had any formal connection. The doubler had no formal connection with MTK, but he was advising Tyson Fury. So he might not have any association, but he was advising Fury and many other MTK boxers. He was even advising Vaughan, as she later confirmed. Daniel Kinahan and the company he founded were joined at the hip, if not on a dotted line. When he moved to Dubai, MTK Global followed, setting up its headquarters there in 2018. Its stock was rising in world boxing and more fighters were joining up. Talented like Belfast Carl Frampton. Whoa, that is a very strange name to come into this picture. And Carl Frampton has been fighting a court battle for a long while, so let's see where this goes. In Houston, over time, almost fugitive conversations, managers and trainers across Britain and Ireland have complained bitterly about us, about MTK's global increasing power in the game. Some have lost fighters to MTK, but only one was prepared to speak publicly. Barry McGuigan from Belfast. Barry McGuigan once stood across the boxing world from one of the most popular and talented fighters on the planet. When he retired, he became a boxing manager, and he has now lost 5 boxers to MTK's pulling power. Me and my boys are invested 18 years of our lives into those fighters that left, he tells me. So it goes on about the risk and all. But there's dodginess here. A lot of dodginess. And in March 2019, a crucial link-up was made with Bob Arum. Bob Arum had just made the most influential player in US boxing. The big television money followed. The 5-fight deal was worth 100 million, capped them all. And look who that is, Bob Arum. And if you don't know your boxing, this man is involved in everything. He's a boxing promoter. He's like a Don King but smarter. But I do find this image looks a bit fake or something. So we'll just read this last bit. And I'm going to continue on with this story. So officially, Kinahan has nothing to do with these deals. Remember, MTK has cut its ties with him, and there are no word about him when Fury secures his world titles of last year. So there was no word about him even when Fury secured the titles last year, but MTK was no longer a startup. And there was more than 200 boxers on his books in the biggest boxing management in Europe, maybe the world. It looks set certainly to involve in what most people are calling the biggest fight in British history, Fury against Joshua. And we can continue on here. But isn't this very strange that this guy is officially Fury's advisor? So, well, what do you think? Goes on to say here, I am not naive about Daniel and his past. This is what Bob said. As long as I understand that I am dealing in this area, sport, they are honourable, they are smart and not doing anything that is anyway devious or wrong. Why would I deal with him? Why wouldn't I deal with him? And where's all this money coming from? Hearn, this is another thing. Hearn as well comes in this. Hearn said he is a guy leading this Tyson Fury ship. Everyone knows, particularly in boxing, that he represents a number of high profile boxers, and he represented Tyson Fury for a number of years. Hearn, so Eddie Hearn, this is Anthony Joshua's promoter, has worked with Kinahan for years. His company told Panorama that he had no influence over the people boxers who choose to have within their management. Yeah. I will always go to Daniel for advice. She trumped, but he personally advised me on other high profile people. Bob Arum, he speaks to Frank Warren, he speaks to Eddie, so he speaks to all these guys. If anybody in world boxing is doing anything about the business in boxing and doesn't speak to Daniel, or speak to those that speak to Daniel, they are telling lies. What the hell? And there's more and more and more. And maybe not at the top of the table, but he's definitely in the room next door. This was a good article. And there's much more. But Dara McIntyre was the author of this, and I do give him credit. And thank you very much for listening by the fire on this. And there is lots of badness around boxing at all times. There's badness around a lot of sports, but it's for you to say that if you believe that this is somewhat a conspiracy within the boxing world, that he's being protected, that this man, this key figure in boxing, is being covered up. And it is a bit dodgy that Card Frampton has signed with the same company, and all the dodginess that was going on there. But thank you very much for listening, and God bless you, and thank you very much, and stick around for the next one, because this rabbit hole goes deep. Thank you very much, and God bless.